So good afternoon. My name is Beau L'Amour, and I have been preceded into the auditorium by Paul Odell there and Joel Bryant. Paul is our producer. I'll get around to doing all these introductions, but Joel is our star actor. We also have Jack Ong right here, another one of our actors. And my mother and sister are sitting over here, and they've come to see whatever happens. But so anyway, as you know from the introduction, my father was the author Louis L'Amour, and since a few years before his death, I've been my dad's editor, art director, copywriter, whatever it took to make the business run and get books into the marketplace. All four of us will give you some background on the history of L'Amour audio dramas, and we'll talk about how audio dramas are adapted from short stories and how we produced The Diamond of Jeru. We'll read a short scene, and then we'll be very happy to answer any questions that you might have. So Dad was a very successful novelist. He learned his trade in the highly competitive pulp magazine business of the 1930s and 40s, then transitioned into writing paperback originals when that format began to disrupt the marketplace in the 1950s. Through a 50-year career, he managed to sell over 300 million books. Louis was so consistently popular that Bantam Books and Random House have used his work to experiment in many different mediums. There was a short story magazine that developed new talent in the Western genre in the 1990s. A beautiful graphic novel or comic book, Law of the Desert Born, that came out in 2013. And since the 1980s, we have produced a very successful series of what we call full cast audio dramatizations. The Louis L'Amour audio dramatizations are very different from the usual single voice, unabridged readings. They're a lot like a modernized version of the radio dramas that were popular from the 1920s until the 1950s. This means a cast of actors, usually between 5 and 20, sound effects, and music. It also means a script that has been completely adapted to fit the medium. Dad was instrumental in convincing his publisher to try doing the audio dramatizations rather than just readings by a single actor. It was pretty rare to find an author who encouraged the adaptation and alteration of his own work in this way. However, Dad loved the theater, and he was well aware of the differences between writing prose and writing for a dramatic medium. The first job that I had in the publishing business was when I was asked to supervise the adaptations of these stories. So, just so that everybody has some idea of what we're talking about, we're going to run a section of the single voice reading of The Diamond of Jeru, and then a similar section from the dramatization. So you could go and run that now.
The Lacklands were an American couple in from Singapore. They were recently married, and most importantly, they were looking for a diamond. They'd come up the Baram River to Marudi, or Claude Town as some called it, and Vandover was going to send them to me. It was late in the day, and the wind picked up slightly coming in over the river to where we sat on his porch near the old fort. I told him about you. Vandover poured cold beer into my glass. He wants to go up the Baram. You want enough money to get you home, and he eyed me mischievously. I suspect you wouldn't mind having one more go at the river yourself. All the better if Mr. Lackland is paying. We toasted my good fortune, and I let the beer slide back down my throat. Cold beer had been a rare and precious luxury in my world for too long. If everything worked out, I would soon be done with Borneo and on my way back to the land of cold beer.
Ah, Mike. I've been looking for you.
Clifton Vandover was the local resident counselor. He'd come out as a young adventurer in the days when Sarawak still belonged to Charles Viner Brooke, the last of the White Rajas, the family that had been given the territory in the 1840s by the Sultan of Brunei.
Still headed for home?
Yeah, slowly. Am I going to be asked to leave?
I shouldn't think so. We just have to keep you from becoming one of these disaffected types the tropics seem to attract. When were you upriver last?
Year, maybe more? Why? What's on your mind?
There's a guide job. The man's an American named John Lackland. He's a physicist with some sort of think tank from California. Atom bombs, that sort of thing. He's got it in his head to go looking for a diamond.
Mike Tardak needed the work. He needed the money to get home, needed it to get through the next week, needed it like air or water.
I don't think so.
It might give me some ammunition with the magistrate.
I'd like to help you out, but
He'll pay good money.
now you're hitting me with both the carrot and the stick.
Whatever it takes, old man.
You know I appreciate it. I don't want to end up playing commanding officer again.
Well, I understand. Do me another kind of favor then.
Sure.
Can you see that he gets whatever advice he needs? Make sure he's kitted out correctly, and find him a guide that's reliable. It would be rather embarrassing if we misplaced this duty.
All right. Sure.
Then you can meet him day after tomorrow at the Singapore boat.
Okay, so two examples, the first being the standard audiobook, the second one of our dramatizations. The first and foremost difference between a short story or a novel and a drama, this would be true of film, theater, or audio, is that virtually all drama runs for a given time, no matter how long or short the original material is, the short story or novel is. The drama has to be a certain length. This requires adding or subtracting characters, scenes, and plot. One of the magical aspects of the author-audience partnership in prose is that the reader's imagination can take over part of the job, filling in many details. This is less true in drama. A novelist can give you the high points of a scene between two people and then move on, but a playwright has to script every line. The order of the lines and the order of the scenes is very important. A script is like a staircase. If every stair isn't exactly in place, the actors will struggle to get past the gap. So the best performances come from scripts that are organized in a manner totally different from a novelist writing prose. Drama's strengths are in letting you witness the interaction between people. This is especially true in audio. Almost every story point needs to be translated into some form of personal interaction, a scene. Drama is best when it shows or demonstrates to the audience the elements that make up a story, rather than telling or describing them. Creating audio drama is much more like writing for the theater than working on book manuscripts. I wrote some of the scripts myself, and I also hired out-of-work screenwriters, playwrights, and film students. For over a decade, our crew of David Rapkin and Charles Potter in New York City, or Paul and I in Los Angeles, produced a new hour-long show every 2 to 3 months, 56 productions in all. Eventually, single-voice readings took over more and more of the business. However, with the support of Random House, Paul and I have been able to do a couple of additional full-cast audio dramatizations. The first of these was Son of a Wanted Man. This was a much more complicated production than we had been able to do in earlier years. It was over twice as long, and it had a huge cast. I believe it was over 22 professional actors, plus myself and Paul and my mother and my sister and most of the control room crew. There were about 40 characters in that script in all. Everybody played a role. Some of us played 2 or 3 roles. We experimented with new processes in many technical areas and spent much more time on the sound effects and music than we had in the past. It was a family project and a labor of love, in every way. The Diamond of Jeru has been an even more extensive production. Paul and I have to work on these projects part-time because we both have other jobs. Producing Son of a Wanted Man took 4 years. Producing The Diamond of Jeru took 7. I believe we have about 450 total days in Jeru. Our process is very similar to doing post-production on a large feature film. If you spread our man-hours across a film crew of 6, you wouldn't be too far off the 90 days or so that it takes to do post-production on a motion picture. As you can probably tell, The Diamond of Jeru is not a Western. Before he ever wrote about the American West, Louis wrote many short stories based on his own travels in the Far East and other more melodramatic pulp adventures, which were quite popular in the years prior to World War II. After the war, the market for exotic or high adventure stories declined and Westerns flourished. It was in this period of transition that Dad wrote The Diamond of Jeru. However, it never sold. The story went into a box, and the box went into a closet, and it was lost for half a century in the mess of Dad's office. It probably didn't see the light of day until I found it in the months after his death. And if we switch the slide there, you can actually see what, this is actually a neat day for my dad's office. This is a minimum of paperwork out, okay? So its being lost was a relatively easy proposition. The basic premise of the story is this. A husband and wife, John and Helen Lackland, arrive in the port town of Marudi, which is head of navigation on the Barham River. Marudi is in Sarawak, a British colony on the island of Borneo. They are hunting diamonds. Mrs. Lackland is very beautiful. Mr. Lackland is very jealous. Mike Kardec, an expatriate American, is hired to guide them upriver, but because of insecurity on the part of John Lackland, he is fired before they can ever get started on their prospecting trip. The married couple unknowingly go off with a renegade Dayak, an island native, who is actually kidnapping them in order to steal the expedition's supplies. Kardec and his Dayak sidekick Raj pursue them, hoping to effect a rescue. Before they see the end of their journey, Kardec and Raj must deal with magic, a deadly curse, and the Dayak's tradition of headhunting as they pursue the Lacklands further and further into the mountains of Sarawak. One of the interesting things about The Diamond of Jeru is that it drew on Louis's first-hand knowledge of Borneo. Though he was never in Sarawak, he spent a little time in Balikpapan on the Dutch side of the island. And if you look over at those pictures, on the far picture is my dad and a Malay barber and a guy named Leaflander, who was another crewman on board the same ship. And just full disclosure here, that picture of my dad that says, where he's holding the life preserver that says the steel worker, that is a fake. My dad actually took that photograph of another guy, and Paul very slickly stuck my dad's head in there. So it's a... Yeah, it's sort of both sides of the camera there. My dad was actually a little taller than that and a little trimmer around the waist, especially in those days. The short story, The Diamond of Jeru, finally made it into print in 1999 in a collection called Off the Mangrove Coast, and there should be a picture of the Off the Mangrove Coast cover. There we go. Creation of The Diamond of Jeru as a dramatized audio began in 2005. Getting the script buttoned up took part-time work for about a couple of years, and I did a good deal of research in Dad's library and referred to his notes regarding the story and other material that he had on Borneo. When I do this sort of work, I try and draw on Dad's life as well as the resources in his library. This particular book, The World Within, is an absolute classic and was incredibly helpful. The few shows that I've scripted and directed have been a real family affair. My mother is the executive producer. Paul O'Dell has been my friend for 40 years. We've worked with the same engineer, Howard Gale, for 30 years, and the same composer for 15 years. We try to reuse the same actors whenever we can, and sometimes my sister will come in and play a part or help me break down a script that I'm going to direct. One of the biggest challenges on this show was casting. We were going to need British, Australian, Indian, and Malay accents. I always try and hire people who actually speak with the accent rather than having an actor sort of fake it whenever I can. In the last 10 years, the internet has made many aspects of the casting process vastly more efficient. Using various websites, we got an overwhelming 2,400 submissions, or about 16 parts, in 1 week. If you have a lot of energy, you can audition about 40 actors a day, maybe one every 15 minutes. After about 10 days of this, I start to lose my mind. So 400 is really about the maximum. That means that the first thing we had to do was the difficult job of rejecting about 2,000 resumes for actors and sorting through them and making sure we didn't miss anybody who was particularly talented. Once we started auditions, each actor had to be greeted with enthusiasm and shepherded through what is a very awkward experience. It was so exhausting that for me, directing the show itself was like a vacation. Now I'm going to turn the mic over to Joel, who'll give you a little sense of what being an actor on one of these things is like.
Yes. Thanks, Beau.
Give it up for Beau, ladies and gentlemen.
There we are. My name is Joel Bryant. I was lucky enough to be cast as Mike Kardec in The Diamond of Jeru when I was just 15. It was that long ago. No, this was unlike any acting job that I've ever had before. You know, when you do voiceover work, any voice jobs, they take away a lot of the main things you learn to use as an actor, your body language, your gestures, your eyes. And so what Beau tried to do was try to create a very authentic experience throughout the whole process. So we weren't just doing voice work, we were still acting through it. You just couldn't see our faces. So he made it very authentic. A number of ways he did that was, as you can see, he put us in the round, meaning we were facing each other the whole time, which is very rare for voiceover work. You know, usually you're in one sound booth, shoulder to shoulder, staring at the engineer. But when you're in the round like this, you can't even see into the engineering booth. So you're just looking at the other actor's eyes and reacting and acting with them. So I could never see what Paul was doing in the engineering booth, and that was probably a good thing. You know, Beau also went so far as to sacrifice ideal recording conditions. Like sometimes he would put two actors on one mic. It creates a greater intimacy, but it also necessitates even more post-production. But he was willing to sacrifice that in favor of getting authentic moments. This was also very unique because Beau was with us inside of the studio the whole time. And you know, usually the unnerving thing about doing any voiceover work is that you're staring at this soundproof glass, and you have the director and the engineer and anybody else in the soundproof glass, and you do your take, you do a couple lines of your scene, and then you see a couple of very concerned faces, looking usually very displeased at what just happened, kind of whispering to each other, and you can't even hear what they're saying because it's soundproof. And then after a few moments of going through your own personal neuroses, you'll hear a voice come on in the dark, and they'll go, "Oh, that was perfect. That was perfect. Let's do it one more time." And you really just, you know how it is, Jack. You know how. But it was great because Beau was inside the studio with us, so he was really directing this much like a TV or film. So he was in there between each take, kind of guiding the performances. And in fact, not only was he directing it and guiding the performances, he was also a prop if you ever needed a prop. So I think there was 2 different times I carried him because I was supposed to be carrying someone who was wounded. And you sound different if you're actually carrying somebody. You know, it kind of affects the breath and the lung and everything else. So Beau would come and drape himself over your shoulders, and you'd kind of like say your lines while you're carrying Beau. You know, because it comes out different when sounds like you're carrying something heavy. Or Beau-sized, not heavy, Beau-sized. Sounds different. But I think that, you know, throughout the whole recording, Beau was... he was a wounded warrior. He was luggage. He was a punching bag. He was a child. He was a dinner guest. He's very versatile, you guys. He's very versatile. And although I was there almost every day playing Mike Kardec, there were 87 scenes that were recorded, and we had to record those in a way to best use the actor's time. So So once again, I always had to rely on Beau to get me in the right mindset because you would jump around left and right. So just like with any other story, any other TV film, any other medium, you really come to depend on the director to help you understand where you are each day as you go in, because you're not doing it in order. And obviously, you want to work as quickly as possible, but you also have to get the best stuff. So usually, we recorded a scene a few times, we got a good take, and then we had time to experiment a little bit. And we never opened it up for improv, because obviously the script took a long time to come together. So we never opening it up for improv. But sometimes Beau would ask us to change up a line, or change up the order of the words, or even change up an inflection, and that just gave them so much more fodder to work with in the post-production process. And I really felt sorry for Paul and Beau in the post-production process, because they had so much stuff to work with, just dozens and dozens of tapes, and there's usually, a lot of projects are always made in the post-production phase, and there's just a lot of cutting and pasting and getting exactly what you want to say, and this was no different, because they had tons to work with, to get frustrated with, to discard, to keep for the best possible takes. And as you listen to it, I think you'll understand that they got. They chose some fantastic takes in there, and I'm not just talking about my scenes. I mean everybody else as well. Most of my scenes. I love listening to it. Side note, I love listening to it because I'd forgotten half the stuff we shot. I was like, oh yeah, that was a fun day. Because above anything else, what we did, we had a blast. We had fun doing this, and that's what working with Beau and Paul was like. One of their main goals was, let's have fun doing this. And when you go in with that goal, you're going to get a good project, because it's a blast to work with the cast that they had, and Paul and Beau and everybody they brought in. It was a blast. So you're going to get a good project. You go in there, you experiment, you record, you laugh, you get serious, you laugh again. Look, we're laughing. I told you. See, we're laughing. And 2 actors on 1 mic. All of us have done. All the actors have done TV, film, stage, all sorts of different mediums, radio, voiceover, everything else. But Beau's motto going into the whole thing, Beau had said, if it feels like we're making a movie, then we're doing it the wrong way. What we do has to be fun. And that really motivates you to do the best work you can for these guys. So I can assure you it was certainly a great time. And hopefully that comes through even in the more dramatic elements of the audio drama. So I'd like to invite Paul O'Dell up here to tell you a little more about the technical stuff. I have no idea what it is.
If you didn't get it, Joel's a stand-up comedian in his real life. So, following all of the hours that we spent in the recording studio with these maniacs, Jack and Joel and the sundry others, recording take after take after take, sometimes upwards of 40 or 50 takes of a scene. Not always the whole scene, but oftentimes little sections of it. Beau and I wandered off to take care of the editing, and we think that most of the actors figured that we had either died or gone away, because it takes us so long to do this process. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot to show for it until we get closer to the end. And it can be a little frustrating for them not to know what's going on. And again, as Beau mentioned, we work on this about 1 week a month for 10 months out of the year. And that takes a long time for us to get through that. So once we settle into doing the dialogue edit, this is what we look at all day long, every day. It's a computer screen, it's got a waveform on it, and that's the sound of the actor's voice on the computer. And we have, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of takes to go through, and we literally listen through each scene, and we try and find a framework for the scene where most of it's good, but there are parts that need to be replaced so that we can find the best scene. The subtle differences between one take and another allow us to create the best performance. Even if they didn't get it all at one take, they oftentimes got it over 2 or 3 takes. We just needed to piece them together appropriately to get the best take that we got out of our actors. It takes a good sense of timing to know that a 1/10 of a second pause can suggest a lie, or it can suggest a moment of embarrassment. When we're finished, what we try to do is cut together scenes that are just dialogue that work as just dialogue. No narration, no sound effects, but the scene stands up as a whole as dialogue. And if we can get to that point, then we figure we're successful. Once we've got all of the scenes cut, then the fun really begins. Beau and I get to get out of this little tiny 12 by 10 room with no windows, and it's soundproof, so it's like living in a box. And we get to get out into the world, and we get to have a lot of fun recording sound effects that we use. We record almost all of our own sound effects. We use a very few. There are some sound effects from Borneo that we got from the Cornell Library and things like that. But most of the sound effects we record live and on ourselves. We have to create thousands of them, and we have to find remote, quiet places in order to record them. Most of our outdoor effects were recorded in the rainforests east of Seattle. We record every single footstep, clothing rustle, body fall, and blowgun shot ourselves. That's me with the blowgun, and Beau with the boat. Yeah. So the downside of doing outdoor effects, and even sometimes the indoor effects, is that you have to find moments of total quiet. No wind, no jets in the sky, no sirens, no cars on the road 6 miles away. It takes a lot of patience to wait for the right moment, and then a frenzy of activity to get it all recorded in the few moments of silence that you have. So next slide. So if you think about it, this is a pretty quiet room. But you can hear the whirring of the cameras. I can hear the air conditioning. I can hear people breathing. Finding total silence is really difficult. So we have to find environments that will mesh with what we're trying to create. So the rainforests of Washington were a great place. It takes a lot of energy to when you find a time when there's no airplane flying over or no car driving by. This is Beau. We thought about doing the parang fight one against the other, but figured that lopping off somebody's hand was not a good idea. So Beau put a machete in each hand and created our parang fight sound effects in this manner. Indoor effects and anything like pyrotechnics were done on the L'Amour Ranch in southwestern Colorado. On the ranch, there are 4 old buildings, houses with floors and doors that creak and squeak nicely. And they also have a lot of furniture in there that make the right sounds. Now, furniture makes sound? Well, of course it does. If you've ever sat on a wicker chair, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So a lot of the houses all have different furniture, different floors, different doors. It gives us a lot of material to work with. The most important building, however, was the 1880s vintage barn that stood in for the timber and thatch longhouses that are found in Borneo. It has several raised wooden floors, and each of those has a unique sound. It also has a tin roof that expands and contracts when the sun goes behind clouds. Now, I don't know if anybody of you have ever experienced that. You'll experience it when you listen to the show. But it is an amazing sound when you're standing in an empty building and the sun shines and you can hear the roof ticking and popping and expanding and growing. And then as the cloud goes in front of the sun, it does exactly the opposite. And you can almost feel it just from listening to the sound. So hopefully we caught that and bring it across in the show. Anything we record with firearms or fire, we like to do in the middle of winter to minimize the dangers. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been to southwestern Colorado in the middle of winter. 20 degrees below zero is not uncommon. And there we are with our recording equipment out in the middle of nowhere trying to make noise. So we had to make up a big fire effect by recording many small fire effects. We have a 300-foot longhouse, which burns to the ground. Now, in the script, when I was reading the script and we were starting to put the plans together for what to record, Beau had put a note in there, especially for me, sound effects note, 300-foot longhouse burns to the ground and crashes. You still with me, Paul? Because he knew that I was going to have to figure out how to put together a 300-foot long longhouse burning to the ground. But we think we did a pretty darn good job. So we ended up finding a guy who supplies decor to tiki restaurants. And he sold us all of his old thatch mats. And they came in handy. We used them for all kinds of things, but the most fun thing was, of course, burning them up. You know, we're guys. We like to burn things and blow things up. And so the L'Amour Ranch in the winter is a perfect place to do that. There's no possibility of any danger for anyone. And we could get a tractor and pile snow on top of things if we absolutely had to. We usually try to record the real thing when we're looking for sound effects, but it's very common that something else works even better. We got some great recordings out of this motorized howitzer, okay? Except for the fact that the guy who owned the motorized howitzer was very proud of it, and he maintained it perfectly. So it sounded like a Mercedes-Benz driving down the street. Did not sound like a tank, and we needed a tank. We were at the ranch one day, and we were listening to the tractor, and we thought, oh my God, there's the tank. And sure enough, that was a beautiful tank. And there's a flashback scene in the show where Mike Karduk, who is an expatriate from the Korean War, he's hiding with PTSD in Borneo, which is sort of the whole idea behind the show. And this is the scene where we use the tractor instead of the howitzer.
Were they dreams or memories? There were times when Mike Karduk could not tell the difference.
Fox, Oboe, able to, fireman. Captain, those civilians, there's still more up there.
What about the tanks?
Yeah, they're everywhere. We barely got out.
Wait.
Enemy armor in attack. Request all available fire.
Crap.
Move over. Artillery, abort mission. Okay, do sir. No rounds in the air. Oh, hell. Hey, give me that carbine. Captain, come back. Fox, Oboe, able to. Cease fire. Captain Karduk, let's go back to town.
Through a hail of red-hot metal and geysers of freezing mud, Karduk ran. Fallen, wounded, he searched for something. A Korean family. A village on a bare Korean hilltop.
Stay down. Stay below the ridgeline. Help us. You must help us. Just stay below the ridgeline. Understand? Get going. Go. Tell him to go. Go.
A leaden sky. Geysers of mud and snow. A sense of loss and failure so acute, it was like cancer growing in his throat, taking his life inch by fraction of an inch.
Fox, Charlie, I got artillery on those tanks now. I don't care who's up there. Affirmative. Assuming fire. Report impact table 2.
So you can hear the tractor treads, the clanking, the squeaking that showed up at the end over here. And that was our tractor as opposed to our motorized howitzer. Also, the sound of the turret turning was not actually a turret turning. It was the winch on Beau's truck that we used. It made just exactly the right sound, it seemed. Then at the end of this, where the explosions happen, you hear a kind of a choking and clanking sound as the tank gets blown up. And what happened was there was this old tractor on the ranch that the L'Amours were preparing to give to a friend, and they wanted to make sure that it was running. And so we went out and we started it up, and I said, if we're going to do this, we got to record it. We're going to use it as the sound effect for a generator or something. And we started it up. It did not start easily. It did not run long. And then it threw a rod and died. And the sound of that throwing the rod and dying was perfect for the end of the tank being blown up and dying. So, but in that instance, that's something that actually was the right sound from the right type of thing to work in that effect. We also got lucky enough in the barn to find a bat. There are bats in Borneo like crazy, and it's one of the sort of interesting parts of the show. And we recorded the bat, and it was sort of anemic. It was a very small bat, and we didn't get much of it. So at the end of the day, because we needed to create things like a tornado of bats, yet another one of those "Are you still with me, Paul" moments, we had to figure out how to do bats. So we got pieces of leather, and we flapped them together, and we got pieces of paper, and we tried all kinds of things, and eventually we ended up with Beau discovering that he could do this.
Ladies and gentlemen, the bat. I cannot do it with this hand.
It's a right-handed bat only. So our tornado obviously turns only to the right. But But we recorded that in various different things. He flapped his hand going over the microphone, going around it, going in all sorts of different directions underneath it. And we just looped it and doubled it and sped it up a little bit and enhanced it, and we came up with our tornado of bats. So if you could run the mass bat effect, please. That's a lot of hand flapping, I gotta tell you. And you can picture us standing there in the middle of a road, in the middle of nowhere, me with my headphones on like this, and Beau going, thank God nobody saw us. It's on video now. So we also added into there, we found a great effect, one of the effects that we didn't record, but we found a great effect of what has to be described as just a butterfly storm. There was a recording of a bunch of butterflies flying, and they gave us some of the higher pitched clicks and snaps that we used just to kind of layer in. So a lot of these sound effects are layered effects. Almost nothing is put in pristine the way it's recorded. It's always sweetened and added to. The machine gun effects from the Korea scene, we don't own a machine gun. We can't get our hands on a machine gun. It's all done with single gunshots. We layer them up. We time them for the distance from one another. And each single individual round from the machine gun is not a single gunshot either. It's actually several layers of guns added together for each firing. And you change it up because nothing's perfect. And so there are all kinds of techniques that we used to create the sound effects. As Beau said, he likes to put as much of his dad in these things as he can. So we used a number of Louis' personal belongings as sound effects props. The sound of Helen's camera was actually Louis' Rolleiflex. The sound when Jeru draws his machete from its wooden sheath was taken from this parang, which Louis apparently took off of one of a gang of thugs who raided his ship one night when they were in the Dutch East Indies. Louis repelled a pirate and stole his parang. So what the heck? I believe the final effect we recorded was in Washington, and it was a mosquito we caught in a plastic jar. Now, Washington, rainforests, normally there are lots of mosquitoes. This was sort of at the end of the season, and we spent all day looking for a mosquito. Could not find one. When Beau comes to Washington to do sound effects, he's got a motorhome that he lives in. And he's parked right out front of the warehouse where I work. And I'm sitting in there packing things up and getting ready to go home, dejected because we could not find a mosquito. And he calls me on the phone and he says, "There's a mosquito in my truck. Get something to catch it in." So I grabbed the jar, plastic jar, and we went out, and Beau caught the mosquito in the plastic jar, and we cut a hole in the plastic, big plastic, I don't know, if you're familiar with Costco's nut jars, that's what it was. So we cut a hole in the bottom of it, shoved the microphone up into the bottom of the jar, and let the mosquito fly, and we caught a great mosquito effect. And so if you'll play the mosquito. Please. Yeah, okay. The mosquito, much to my chagrin, we let go. So no mosquitoes were harmed in the making of this. I don't want to get any phone calls. After we recorded the sound effects, we were back in the studio for a couple of years, editing them into the show. And for us, this is another fantastic time because this is when the show really begins to sound like a show. We really get to create the environments that these characters come to life in. We get to create the things that affect them directly, the rivers, the water, the blowgun fights, all kinds of things. Beau records a temporary version of the narrator's track so that we can get everything timed out, so that we know what the narrator's going to say and how long it's going to take. It's a very slow but creative process. And small sounds like someone shifting their feet or leaning back in a chair can add tremendously to an actor's performance. Big sounds like explosions and a duel of machetes add to the drama, and behind it all is layer after layer of ambience, birds, distant voices, wind, and rain. A number of narrators we considered for this show, but ultimately the perfect voice seemed to be Joe Morton. He's done a number of voice recordings. He was last did How the West Was Won for us a few years before. You might recognize him from Scandal, The Good Wife, or Terminator 2. And Joe's our narrator, and we have a scene with quite a bit of Joe.
That's interesting.
The two figs rose on either side of the path, forming a gateway into the dark jungle. Helen could clearly see why they were called stranglers. One of them was hollow. The original tree that it had wrapped itself around, like a network of veins and sinew, had completely rotted away.
Now hold on. I don't want to waste a whole day if I don't have to.
A burgundy and green pitcher plant as big as a handbag grew from one of the gaps in its trunk.
Listen to me. I do listen.
A parasite on a parasite.
Relax. Take pictures.
Its fanged hood overhanging a sack half full of digested fluid and swarming with dead and dying insects. A trap for the greedy or unwary.
Yuck.
The ravine wasn't as overgrown as it looked. In fact, it seemed that some of the area behind the two big trees had been cleared. In the clearing were two longboats, much older than the ones they had come upriver in. They were supported by small piles of stone to keep them away from termites and rot. Beyond them, the path continued, a dark tunnel running away into the jungle. Helen turned. Standing there was one of the crew of their supply boat, a stocky older man with torn earlobes and several missing teeth.
No, Missy. Dangerous.
She noticed for the first time that the backs of his hands were covered with dark designs.
So once we got Joe cut into the show and everything timed out, now it's time to start the process of working with our wonderful composer, Phil Chanel. I think we have a picture of Phil. Yes. Phil Chanel, we've worked with Phil for 15 years. He did music for us on our last project. He is a fabulous, fabulous composer and musician. Just a great, great, great guy. And we apologized to him over and over and over again because the music he produced for us is so amazingly beautiful, but it has to run underneath dialogue and sound effects, and so we had to keep turning it down. We felt so bad because it's so good. I don't know if you listen to the music. The 12 minutes before we started this was all music from the show, all stuff Phil did, and the music in the show. It adds to every moment. It allows you to. It helps you to know what to feel, what to think. And so we worked very carefully together to fit the music into the show, sometimes rewriting or mixing the scene until everything worked perfectly. And what we thought was one of the best sort of, the scene where we thought that the music and the scene came together the best is the scene that we're going to play now. And I think something to, go ahead and start it, something to keep in mind, the wind chimes in the background, Phil plays the wind chimes.
Kardec awoke in his
They sound
bungalow
random.
on the
they're not.
Barham River.
They're tuned.
He had vague memories
And
of ships and a
when the
hospital,
music comes in,
concrete floors
they
and white
flow
walls,
right in.
IV bottles and pain. They had pumped him full of penicillin and Primaquil, cut the birdshot out of his foot, and left it full of drains. It was like it all happened a long time ago. But maybe that was the fever, or the drugs, or just the curse of the tropics. Through the mosquito netting, she was a vague figure, shimmering white, then silhouetted against the sunlight on the road.
Mr. Carter,
He struggled to sit up.
we're leaving. I just wanted to thank you. You saved our lives.
How's your husband?
He has a concussion and a bad sprain. All the walking he did made it worse. He's exhausted. So am I. He won't talk to me. It's like I did something unforgivable back there, but I don't see that I really had a choice.
It's alive. You're alive. Whatever he thinks, it's better than the alternative.
I guess so. There's something else. Something I really don't know how to say.
It's okay. Not everything needs to be acted on. Right?
We should pay you.
She opened her purse.
At least what we were going to for guiding us. We owe you that. And more.
He reached out and stopped her.
I don't want any money.
Will you be all right?
Yeah.
She stood, and he looked up at her. She put her fingertips in his hair, combing it back off his forehead.
I have your book. I haven't finished it.
You should.
I'll return it to you.
I'm sure you will.
Hours passed, and he drifted in and out of sleep. Spirits, or shadows, hung in the dim corners of the room. Inghai, Korean villagers who had once begged for help, fellow Marines, men whose names he had never known, dead in cocoons of snow on the banks of a frozen reservoir. In the distance, thunder rumbled, but in his dreams, the guns were silent. And under the spiral tattoo, Mike Kardec's heart beat easily.
So we love Phil's music. We hate having to hide it underneath the scenes because it really is phenomenal. And I mean, it works so amazingly well in so many ways. The final step in the process, once we have all of the music and sound effects and dialogue in the show, is what's called mastering. And mastering is the process of taking what you have created and setting it up to be distributed on CD or as an MP3. It's probably the most difficult process to describe because it's just filled with lots of little minute adjustments, small touches to tone and volume, and it's a long process. It takes a very delicate adjustments and compromises, and in the end, we just have to pray that we've done it right. We've listened to the CDs that have been produced from this, and I think we're both extremely happy with the way that it turned out. So kudos to Random House and everybody there for getting that part of the process dead on right. So we'd like to thank them for sure. Now, Jack Ong and Joel Bryant and Beau L'Amour will recreate a moment or two from the recording session.
Okay. Soon, we've come to Enghai's village. Kardec is traveling with Raj, his buddy, who is also Enghai's grandson. And they've come upriver looking for the Lacklands, and they have stopped off at Enghai's village to find out if anybody knows anything. So here we go. Soon, Enghai joined Kardec at the rail of the veranda, looking out across the darkening fields towards the river. Enghai offered Kardec a bottle, but Kardec shook his head.
You don't drink?
Inghai, Iraq is just about the wickedest booze on earth. It will make you do things you do not remember. I have to be headed upriver in the morning.
Behind them, the young Kilbit woman began a dance, and more bottles of Iraq were passed around.
Something has changed in you. Like Untung, your soul is returning. I can see it in your eyes.
Enghai tapped Kardec on the chest.
Let me see it.
Kardec unbuttoned his shirt, and Enghai examined the tattoo in the flickering light.
You know, I make magic for you. When I found you, you were very sick, sick enough to die. I try everything. Finally, obat. This is for luck. I think it works very well.
Enghai, you're my friend, but I'm afraid all of my luck has been bad. I have no money, I've lost 2 jobs.
No. Magic does not work that way, Mike. Luck doesn't work that way. You will not have the luck you want. You will have the luck you need. There is no choice in the matter.
Well, I can use whatever I can get, that's for sure.
I know you will doubt, but these forces do surround us, like the wind, though less easily seen.
Farther down the veranda, a young girl sat down beside Raj. For a long moment they looked at each other. Then she delivered a steaming scoop of rice to the palm leaf that served him for a plate and moved on.
So why do you come?
Well, there's 2 Americans I think are headed into trouble. Have you seen anyone on the river? A white man and a woman with native guides?
No, but I can ask. How are they in trouble?
The pirate Jeru. Is he still alive?
Enghai's eyes retreated into shadow.
Do you know?
Well, it was said that Tuan Jeru is Bali Saleng, a black ghost, that all men with him are sakit hati. They are killers and rapists, and no village would have them. In the days when I knew him, Jeru still took heads to make his magic.
Well?
Kardec indicated Enghai's tattooed hands.
Even you may have taken a few heads in your time?
Well, maybe someone I really didn't like. I will find out what I can. Mike, I am happy. You no longer fight who you are. But Jeru? Be careful, my friend.
Kardec turned and watched Enghai go. Over where Raj sat, the girl was back. This time she had brought cups of wine, one for him and one for her.
It's like we're doing it all over again.
We're now going to do the Q&A, but we're going to roll these chairs up here and change up our mic situation just a little bit. So hold on just a moment. All right, so any questions? I'll just hand the microphone to whoever seems more appropriate. Oh, if I didn't have a microphone in front of me, I would just start screaming with laughter. So you just asked, how do we handle the dynamic range so that we can manage the difference between a whisper and a gunshot? It is unbelievably hard. Okay, so on the recording side, a gunshot isn't all that difficult. What's really, really difficult is the difference between the level that an actor can put out with their voice when they're this far from the microphone. And so a very, very soft word and then going to something that's much more strenuous and much more dramatic is extremely difficult to handle. We actually make 2 different recordings at exactly the same time. One of them turned down 10 dB. So when we're in the studio, we're actually making 2 recordings of each different actor, each different voice, one of them much softer than the other, so that we can pick one or the other if there's a difference. It's remarkably hard, and I don't ever like to interrupt the actors and say, "Oh, could you do that more quietly? Can you change your volume?" I like to have it just perfectly managed. And so I create this horrible situation, for the actors. I hand him this horrible situation of, okay, you've got to make this totally transparent, and you just have to leave them alone and let them do what they want to do. And in this particular show, not only did we do that 2-channel recording thing, but the microphone preamp that we used, we were using it to control all of our volume. And he and our wonderful old engineer created this device where they glued these little motors to the knobs on the microphone preamp so they could control them remotely. And the microphone preamp, after a certain number of hours, got very hot. And the glue melted. Okay? And
at the worst possible score.
and I would, I was in the studio with these guys and I don't quite know what's happening. And I was, I would move very quickly from one scene to another as quickly as I possibly could. And I'd be like, okay, Paul, got that, we're moving on. And I'd have these guys shuffling their papers, ready to go on for the next scene. And I'd see all this running around in the control room and people throwing their hands up, and everything. And he was screaming at Howard, our engineer, to make the thing work. And Howard was like screaming that it wasn't working. And, it was a disaster. We did get everything, but level is really difficult. Now, on the output side, once we've got the recording, I'll hand that over to Paul, and he'll talk a little bit. He'll give you a brief version of that, but basically, you manage it on the input side when you're making the recording, and you manage it on the output side when you are getting ready to master the show and deliver a final show.
The most common way of managing that once you've got the stuff in the systems is to compress it. It's called compressing it. And basically what it does is it takes the high level material and pushes it down, and it takes the low level material and makes it louder so that all of your sound fits into a little narrow window. Beau and I hate that. We hate that a lot. We avoid that as much as we can. So we do what we call a manual compression. And that means that we listen to the show at a lower volume. So that forces me to turn up the volume of low-level things without going over. And then ultimately, when we get into the mastering stage, we do a little minor compression just to sort of level things out.
What's available to download on the iPhone or the iPad, or can you get it in a podcast? Some of your recordings?
The question is can you download our recordings? And yes, you can go to iTunes or you can go to Audible, and you can buy downloads there, or you can come to our website, and we use an extremely high quality MP3 codec, and so you probably get the best results from our LouisL'Amour.com. Let me repeat that, LouisL'Amour.com. All right, then I guess we will adjourn. Thank you all so much for coming.